Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you very much for joining me here. I hope you're having a great day. Let's take another look here at Bitcoin, see what's going on. Is a crypto market overview for the most part because there's some critical stuff going on here, specifically the Fed's unlikely to cut rates, but more importantly, FOMC meeting effectively today. That is at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So when that occurs, you need to make sure that it's probably best to just kind of avoid trading or consider waiting is the best way to call it. Okay, so make sure that you are not being a crazy trader going into that. And historically too, just to give you some perspective, I looked at the charts here. With the exception of June 18th, this most recent time frame, the price went down after the FOMC. The first three effectively increased the price afterwards. So we saw some pretty significant pumps in the market. So that basically just gives us a 75% probability the price goes up. Once more, there's a lot of caveats there. We're going to take a look here, of course, at XRP, holding very strong in its current support of 3 to 315. SUI is testing its ascending trend line here. Kind of looks like it wants to break down and hit its support range. I'm personally just waiting for a long position in the 340 to 360 range, just to be on the safe side, even though it may not come back down, especially if the price goes up today for Bitcoin. However, Solana is working itself into a triangle pattern, and of course, ETH also has a very similar pattern as well. So generally best to wait for those to break out before you consider trading in either direction too, by the way. All right, you don't just don't short into a key level support, which we're seeing a lot of those happening right now. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. Let's jump into the actual crypto market overview. The best thing to describe it as is just kind of an overview of what's going on here. So we're going to talk about this here first. ETF net inflow. We're still seeing a low amount of inflow into Bitcoin. So while Bitcoin's going sideways and we're seeing fear and greed index go kind of down, that's a very positive sign in the overall sense. It does mean and imply that altcoins could continue a bit lower. What I'm getting at here is altcoin season index. This is just kind of a gauge of how well these coins are doing versus Bitcoin. For the most part, we're seeing that taper off as the total market cap value goes down. So as we continue to trend into the 1.4 trillions, we can see Bitcoin dominance starting to increase and effectively giving us the indication that altcoins are not seasoning well right now. Okay, so that's kind of the concept there. So let's go ahead and start with some of the basic stuff. First of all, let's go ahead and start with altcoin dominance. This kind of tells us pretty much everything we're looking at here. It does exclude Ethereum and stablecoins, but for the most part, everything except for those two coins and stablecoins is coming down. So it's an easy indication here to let us know that we are tentatively topped out here on this little push, this little bull run for altcoins. So I do think we're going to continue to see some bleeding effects, especially if Bitcoin cannot reclaim 120 soon. We're seeing some problems with altcoins pumping, and it's pretty consistent. Stablecoins, we can see here, slowly increasing here as well. As increased stablecoins occur, we see more monies flowing away from altcoins and just kind of sitting in stablecoins until the time is right. So basically, people are waiting to buy is the concept right now. They feel like Bitcoin is topped out. And it's actually okay because we want our fear and greed index to pull back. We want people to be scared because that's when the better buying opportunities occur, right? So that's kind of the concept there. Volatility is tapering off as well, generally not a great sign either. So for the most part, we're not looking in a fantastic situation. And once more, just kind of reiterate and reaffirm, we can see the CME gap once more here between 114 and 115.7. Now, a lot of folks think that this is a placebo and or just something that doesn't really always happen, but historically, like 90% of CME gaps get filled. So it's just a matter of time. It doesn't mean it's going to happen now or right away, but the distinct probability is still there, okay? So we just got to be mindful with that being still in the close proximity. It's definitely a realistic possibility, okay? Can't rule it out. So taking a look here at the Bitcoin chart, actually, let's jump into the back-end liquidation data first. I want to make sure we understand this before we do, because I just want to kind of highlight something for you too first. And this isn't like super telling for us here, but generally the bid-ask ratio, that's what this guy is here, is shifting kind of bearish. So we're starting to see more asks than bids. So it basically just implies that there's more people wanting to sell versus wanting to buy. So if there's more sell orders, then hypothetically they're going to get filled, right? That's the concept there. But once more, that is you got to take that with a grain of salt. What we also want to understand is that we got a lot of support at 117,300. That's like the pretty significant support range based on open interest. So until we lose that level, we can presume we're going to continue to range between 117.3 and roughly 119, or more importantly, 120. But the local shelf here is about 119.3. So we're in like a tight little $2,000 gap right now. We can see liquidation short delta is higher. implying we have $2 billion more in liquidation shorts, which basically just implies that there's more people shorting. So as we see more asks entering the market and more shorts, they're one and the same in a lot of ways, but that really just effectively tells us that the price action is going to have difficulty going higher based on that. Okay, now we want to pay attention to volume, and we will, because that could be a determining factor there for us. But if volume starts to dry up, then those shorts will start to succeed and the price will pull back. Once more, we're trading into an FOMC meeting here in just a couple of hours. By the time you watch this, that may have already happened. So I'm very curious, honestly, what's going to occur, but no one truly knows the future, right? So we just want to look at this stuff to increase our odds of statistical probabilities so we can obviously try to find a better position here. To try to trade in either direction. Overall, this is longs on the left, and right here is the amount of shorts. So a lot of shorts are underwater at 117.3, and longs are, the early longs are okay, but late longs are not. So truth is, both longs and shorts are getting pretty hammered right now. And that's effectively the case when things are range bound. Range bound activity causes a lot of funkiness. So it's not something that's optimal trading conditions. That's the easy way to put it. We do have a doji candle here forming so far today. So keep that in mind. That's an indecisive type of scenario. And generally speaking, when you start to bottom out with a doji candle, the price will continue higher, and the inverse as well on the way up. But once more, we didn't really pull back all that hard. It's only a couple days or 1 day of selling pressure there. So nothing too crazy there. Honestly, we're still in this type of scenario right now where we have mostly bearish divergences, but we're also kind of treading water right here with that 20-day SMA. So the daily time frame doesn't tell us too much. I'm sure there's going to be some people out there telling you that they have like the best indicator, telling you an earlier warning reversal sign, but there's nothing really there. There's a lot of just conflicting information, and that just generally happens when you're range bound and you keep breaking different keep retesting support, retesting resistance. It's very annoying to trade. Honestly, I don't like range bound trading. And at this point here, we're seeing kind of this shift in momentum, but it's super early to tell. Until our money flow index is back up above the RSI, I don't feel super confident about taking a long at this juncture. So that's kind of where we're at there. And keep in mind, our point of control here locally is 118,000. Closing above that level would signify a potential continuation higher. I think it would just increase the odds ever so slightly to give us more probability of going to 120 or further. But between now and then, I wouldn't read into it too much. That's just kind of our tentative resistance in this range. So that's where Bitcoin's at. Kind of a whole lot of nothing, or more importantly, just not super amazing, right? And that's how it's going to be a lot of times. Trading is like this here. It can't always be exciting. Not everything's going to go to the moon or to the ground floor. This is just kind of one of those neutral-ish type of days here where we're in this unique transition. As I mentioned yesterday, we have a transitional type of scenario right now. And until time lapses, we're not going to be able to see that happen, right? So at this point, that's where Bitcoin is at. Generally speaking, it's best to kind of wait for the range to be broken before you consider trading. Jumping over to Ethereum, the best way to describe it here is we're holding above support. Our previous high is working as a new low. So the likelihood of further upside is greater based on this triangle pattern working itself into a descending, basically a parallel low and a lower high pattern, telling us that the bears are starting to lose control and the bulls are starting to gain control by adding to that lower level there. So 3750 to 3700 once more is that desired entry zone for a potential long here at this level. A lot of this hinges on course on Bitcoin, but for the most part, Ethereum is still very strong. And we can see this with the net inflow of ETFs, right? That it's still higher than Bitcoin. And this is a very good sign, right? So overall, generally speaking, we want to look for that. And that's ultimately what tells us a lot there. So when we look at, what is it? We're going to take a look here at the back-end liquidation data first. And when we looked at this yesterday, if I recall correctly, we had a decent amount of liquidation above the price action at that 4,000. That really hasn't changed too much. But there's extra longs here now too at 3,700 to 3,600. That's understandable because that is a nice support range for us. So let's take a quick look here on the right-hand side and recognize it. 3,750, open interest, that's a solid area of support. And 3,800 is that current resistance for open interest. So we got heavy accumulations both above and below that, all right? So that just kind of tells us that the channel of 3,750 to 3,800 is that support level. And we got 2 billion in short liquidation delta, implying we have more shorts than longs in the market. So there is suppression here in this price action. People are trying to short this coin more, but once more, with this kind of pattern here, it is higher risk to consider shorting Ethereum, even though it does feel like there's a lot of meat left on the bone. All that being said, we do have a fair value gap between 3,650 and 3,700. I'd say that would be an extreme worst case scenario for us. We also have confluence there with that 0.618 fib level, once more adding to that support. All right, so yeah, I'm not even gonna go off about the other scenarios there. Let's go ahead and talk quickly about Solana here next. But when we look at the daily time frame, just to quickly understand here, there's nothing super bearish about Ethereum. Like, we're looking pretty solid here in the overall sense. We're still over 70 on the RSI. The only divergence we see is the MACD, and that's pretty standard when you have this kind of run to the upside like we've seen here so far. Okay, so truth is, while Ethereum could pull back and should pull back, it's not giving us any firm indications that it will. Okay, Solana, let's take a look here. Recognize this here. This is not a fantastic sign on the macro, even though we are in our support range, our previous high, potentially retesting itself as a new low. We're not seeing a ton of opportunity here, or this isn't looking like it's really wanting to take off. It's a triangle pattern, yes, but let's make sure to double check the back end stuff and kind of see where we're at, because when we look at open interest, we really only have one last leg of support here, 178. So we lose 178, we're probably going to continue lower. We have 2 billion in short liquidation delta. That's quite high for Solana. And we also want to recognize too, 175 is that area, that pocket of liquidation. So I think it would make a lot more sense to see 175 tested here soon, and possibly even 165 to 170 once more. That is the local support, basically on a previous high that hasn't been retested as a new low, that 0.5 fib level. So I would feel much more confident taking a long position with Solana in the 160, in the mid 160s to 170s, right? Right now, it just feels kind of desperate to take a long, but let's double check here and make sure, right? We don't just take trades based on feelings, because feelings, well, I have them, and we all do. They can't necessarily be trusted, right? So MACD is diverging. We can see this. That's check number one. We're under 50 on the RSI. No, correction, we're under 70 on the RSI, moving towards 50. Money flow index is still above the price, but we lost our moving average there. That's usually an early indication letting us know that a strong shift in momentum has occurred. So we have more confirming factors of the downside on the daily. And the 4-hour time frame, while stochastic is trying to swing up, our money flow index is super low. Keep in mind, generally speaking, when the money flow index does hit 20, which we're getting close to that level, it's usually an overextended state and the price will start to rally. We saw it back here where the price rallied. We could very well see it again. Okay, so it's difficult to want to take a long in this situation here. But if you are a gambling type and you really love this coin, maybe consider doing so. But it's not really ideal trading conditions to do that. I'm going to set an alert in the 170 range. So that way I can kind of reevaluate if the price gets down to that level and see if it's worth taking along, because that 0.5 fib level plus the previous highs that haven't been retested as a new low yet, that's something I'm going to be interested in seeing. All right, let's move on to SUI and kind of see where we're at here. SUI is it's also looking pretty choppy here. We got an ascending broadening wedge type of pattern here, which, by the way, is generally construed as a bearish sign, right? While it's not exact and never a perfect science, I'll clean up the charts and post a new playout chart on Twitter, Telegram, or Discord. We want to look here and recognize the backend data first before we play any type of patterns, right? And when you trade patterns, you want to make sure you trade them with confluence and other factors there. So let's take a look here. We can see 377 is that local area point of control. People are averaging in the most in here. But once more, $4 is that significant area of open interest. In other words, we have a lot of exit liquidity if the price comes there. So as mentioned previously, $4 is that resistance. We can also recognize here we got $1 billion in short liquidation delta, letting us know that there's more shorts than longs. You generally want to go with a trend here. We're starting to see a theme, right? Most every single altcoin has this bearish type of undertone to it. So it's not really optimal trading conditions to try to take a long. However, a lot of them are testing their support levels, so those oftentimes lately have proven to be more beneficial in a lot of ways because market makers really love destroying these late shorts. So it's a very tricky market, folks. So try not to get frustrated if you're having difficulty understanding or keeping up with it, because it's a mess. That's the easy way to understand it. Okay, so I'm going to save that for later, but I want to look here at 320, 340, and 360. Those are the three areas of concentration here for liquidation. The key takeaway here is that there's more potential or propensity rather for this coin to continue lower. I think that we are due to see a little bit lower of a continuation. Now let's take a look at the daily time frame and just kind of recognize a few important factors here. Now when we look at this area here, we can see our support range between 340 and 360. It's a solid area of support. We want to continue to maintain that level, or more importantly, add to our position as the price goes down into that range if that were to happen. So that's a much safer place to consider averaging in than it is right now. But we also got to recognize we are double bottoming or basically retesting this lower support range. But if you look at the overall sentiment, MACD is diverging. We can see our money flow index is tremendously lower than our RSI, basically implying we have weakness in this coin. And then we also want to recognize too, the 4-hour time frame has very similar circumstances. Same thing as well. Our money flow index is still low. Our RSI is tapering off. We can also recognize that stochastic, while it's swinging up, that's a natural consensus there. It's not really optimal trading conditions. Okay, so I know it's difficult, and I probably sound like a broken record because I say this for every coin right now, but there's nothing here that's really telling us that we should consider a bunch of long positions here, right? Furthermore, too, when you kind of look at the overall sentiment here, we are testing our ascending trend and we are overextended. So the bright side here is that further downside, unless Bitcoin continues to run, is lower probability. But if Bitcoin just slowly bleeds out, I think we're going to see the same thing for SUI. But at this point, we are pretty well overextended and likely to see a reversal in the relative near future. Shorting this kind of bottom feels kind of risky to me. So this is one of those coins where you don't want to short or take a long, honestly. It's just kind of in a weird transitional state. So those are my thoughts. If you have different ones, of course, why don't you comment below, let us know. Love to hear it. Also, quick heads up, I've gotten tons of questions about it. Link down below for cryptocash.tech if you are curious in becoming a better trader or just want to be a little more consistent with a good community with you. I do have a 50% off bonus, or discount rather. You can lock it in for the lifetime of your membership. A link down below for that. Make sure you take advantage of that before that's over. That is only offered once a year rather, and it ends in 36 hours, sometime tomorrow. Okay, so heads up on that. All right, so taking a quick look here at XRP, there's a very last important thing here to recognize. XRP is fighting really strong in this lower range. So we're seeing a lot of volume flowing in every time we come into this $3 range, basically 3 to 305 to be more specific. So there's a lot of sustainability here. So losing that level, I think, it's gonna take a lot of volume and a pretty significant pullback from Bitcoin to see that happen. Now, it could very well occur, but today being FOMC, I don't really trust it. But overall, we can see a lot of open interest here that has been relieved at about 313 and some late longs at about 307. But if you look at liquidation short delta, it's still super high to the downside. And if we look at liquidation as well, it doesn't really tell us too much, but 320 is that next area of liquidation. We could see that swept here soon. All in all, it sounds like a broken record once more, but there's a lot of divergences here on this coin that are generally best not to want to trade into. Now, full disclosure, we have an average position of 308, 309 for our XRP long, but that's based on the premise that I feel $3 is going to hold, and that I feel also, at least as of yesterday when we took the trade, we took the trade 2 days ago, I feel XRP and Bitcoin are both running consistent with each other. And I think based on what we've seen here so far, that unless we have some pretty bad news here today, Bitcoin should continue to progress in its range of 116 to 120. So there's a lot of that here, but the key takeaway here is that we got a couple of doji candles here, potential reversal on our hands, and while there's nothing super divergent here on the charts, it's pretty consistent with a lot of other coins. This coin does have a unique following and more propensity to pump than it would dump. Those are just, once again, my thoughts there. But from a technical standpoint, we have a pretty unfortunate situation where underneath all moving averages, we're still establishing lower highs on the macro from the larger time frames, right? And then we also want to recognize too that we're in a position where MACD is trying to converge, but it still hasn't done so yet. And we're also seeing the RSI try to shift momentum. These are important things here. We are starting to see that early sign of reversal. This is one of the few coins that has it on smaller timeframes. But once more, smaller timeframes don't last too long unless they stay consistent for a set duration. So the best strategy I would say is to wait for the daily candlestick to close. That's usually how I try to play it before you consider taking a long. And at the very least, make sure you wait for FOMC today to get to occur first, right? But at this point, that's kind of where we're at there. I know is a lot. Appreciate you hanging through there if you're still watching from the get-go. And thanks again for being an amazing part of my life too. I want to say, regardless of everything, regardless how crazy and nonsensical the market can be, I just want to say I thank you for being really awesome and supportive. And you definitely know who you are, right? So appreciate you. Thanks for always liking the videos. We'll look forward to seeing the next one. Have yourself a great rest of your day. Take care of yourself out there. Bye-bye.